What's up, dads? It's your boy Big Dave, back with another episode of Culture Dad's Age of Sword Cassette. Speaking of old school fiction, we got a good topic today. But how you doing, Mike? How we doing?
Yeah, no, not too bad. This was a blast from the past. I really enjoyed. I didn't actually read through the book that we're going to discuss, but I did read a pretty good synopsis of it, and it brought back some memories. I haven't read this book in like 25 years, I think it's been, about that, maybe even longer. So, but it was a formative influence on me. But yes, no, I'm excited about it.
Yeah. So what we're going to talk about today is we are going to talk about the author. He's considered to be a like the godfather of science fiction, or at least one of them, and one of his stories in particular, and I'm talking about H.G. Wells and the Time Machine, right? So this is a book. When did it come out? It came out in 18 something or other. No. It came out in 19 something or other. I don't know what years exactly.
I know it's like right around the turn of the century. I want to say
1895. 1895 okay. It came out 1895. Yeah. So very, very old story. H.G. Wells himself is actually a very, very interesting character, and I kind of wanted to touch on that a little bit before we get into his works, because you have to sort of, if you really want to dig into his works and where he was coming from, you got to kind of understand this guy. H.G. Wells, Herbert George Wells, was born in 1866 in Kent, England. He's an English guy, and he was born. He had a full family, normal family, sorta, except that his family sort of had financial problems. His mother was a very meek, kind of soft-spoken, conservative woman, and his dad was like this pie in the sky optimist sort of guy. His dad was actually a professional cricket player in his younger years, and did a bunch of other stuff. And then him and his wife together opened a family business that sold like ceramics and sports gear, and it's like a general store kind of thing, I guess. And it didn't do well. So over the years, between that and his father was also a notorious philanderer, between those things, their marriage sort of didn't go very well, right? Their marriages didn't go very well, and this led to financial problems with their family. So Mr. Wells got sent to go work in a drapery factory, which did, like, you guys know what drapery is. So they would do textiles and everything, drapery, whatever. And as a young man, he hated it. Wells hated it. So he really wanted to go. He wanted to be a scientist, right? He was obsessed with science. He was really ahead of his class at school with this kind of stuff. So he eventually got himself into a school to get into doing science and to be an apprentice chemist. Well, he left the factory to go do that, and he did that for a while. Unfortunately, to be an apprentice, you don't get paid. So his family made him go back to the drapery factory, which he hated, obviously. So after a while, he kept going with his studies, and the guy was just brilliant, right? He absolutely crushed it. At tops of his class, was just a brilliant scientist. So he goes on to go into, like, I guess, some sort of higher university. And he actually does very, very well there, except he starts getting into something that his father really liked, and that was being a promiscuous man. The guy had so many women throughout his entire life. It's crazy. If you look at, he sired tons of children to several different women throughout his entire lifetime. It's absolutely nuts. This guy could not keep it in his pants. He was a madman. But anyway, he was also very brilliant. And in this time during college, he starts getting into at the time what they called scientific romance, or what we now call science fiction. He starts writing science fiction works. So he writes things. He wrote The Time Machine. He wrote, it was originally called something else. I forget what it was originally called. He also wrote Island of Dr. Moreau, The Invisible Man. You guys will know War of the Worlds, The War in the Air. He wrote all kinds of books. He was a very brilliant scientific romance writer, incredible writer. And this actually made him quite a bit of money, right? In the late 1800s, writing these types of works, because towards the late 1800s, it starts getting away from Gothic and going into weird fiction, as we talked about before. And also they were getting into adventure fiction. They didn't want Gothic fiction so much anymore. They wanted adventure. They wanted heroes and adventure and weirdness and all kinds of stuff. So he wrote this stuff, and he was one of the OGs in the game. And that went on to make him pretty famous and pretty wealthy. And he goes on, and he actually flunks out of college for some reason and goes on to become a teacher, which he did very well at. He was a very gifted teacher. And this is around the time he like meets his first wife, and he continues writing scientific romance. However, he's not really happy. It's not good enough for him. He actually wanted to be regarded as a serious, like, intellectual. H.G. Wells was a socialist. He was a progressive, which was actually pretty popular around those times among academic circles and stuff like that. The Fabian Society was going on at that time, in which H.G. Wells later became a part of. Which H.G. Wells actually sort of here's something that H.G. Wells does throughout his history: is he sees something that he likes. He kind of comes near it. And because of his genius, those who are part of the thing say, oh, we got to get this guy in. And then H.G. Wells says, nah, this sucks. And he leaves. That's what he does every single time. So he goes to Fabian Society later on. They try to pull him in. He like, this looks good. He's like, nah, this blows. I'm out. So he doesn't get in there. So instead, what he does, he starts banging one of the dude's wives. And he slithers his way into the Fabian Society, sort of takes it over and completely changes it, because he thought that they were just a bunch. I believe his critique was it was just a debate society. It was a debate club for upper middle class socialists, whatever. He pretty much said that they were just like champagne socialists, just doing endless discourse and jerking each other off, and didn't actually.
So he turns it into his own personal harem.
Yeah. As he turns it into his harem. Yeah. And then it just goes on and on and on. He does this. He writes more books. He eventually goes on to he goes on to influence the League of Nations, right? He goes on, he takes over the Fabian Society. He from his like classrooms, he like influences all kinds of like crazy people. The guy that invented Winnie the Pooh, that wrote Winnie the Pooh, was a protege of H.G. Wells, which is pretty weird. Lots of crazy stuff. He met with Stalin and thought he was kind of a retard. He's like, he's a very honest man, but this guy's a retard. He met with Vladimir Lenin and said the same thing. He's like, oh, I appreciate his energy and everything, but this guy's a fucking idiot. This guy, like, he was like very critical of the socialist movements at that time. He liked them, that they were happening, but he thought they were all too short-sighted. They were too low level. He didn't like this idea of boiling things down to bullet points to appeal to the masses. He thought that there should be a caste system globally. He was a globalist. He was like one of the first globalists. And he believed that there should be a caste system among the whole entire world. Now, here's the thing that I want to say. When we look back in history and we look at guys like H.G. Wells, we often have this very light switch brain way of looking at people. We have this we want to see this distinction of our guy or not our guy. The problem with this is that guys that are really, really, truly brilliant and move and change things and all these kinds of things, men of great note in history, are very seldom anybody's guy. They're usually their own guy, and they don't really have it. They are so completely break the mold, and they're so weird in their own animal that it's nobody's guy. Nobody can claim them, right? Not even people in their time, right? So H.G. Wells was kind of our guy and kind of not our guy. And
to be honest, I think you mentioned these two guys in that same connection. I think Lenin and Stalin are good examples of that, especially Stalin. They're obviously both socialists. They're obviously both communists, which is something that's pretty antithetical to what we're about. But at the same time, I mean, Lenin was a vanguardist. He was an elitist, sort of a almost in some ways like an elitist in denial. Stalin was like quasi-fascist. It was like, yeah, it's like great men are very hard to claim, like, you know, according to one ideology, because really what they are is they're sort of like the fountainhead of an ideology in and of themselves. They're like the source of that kind of thing, right? So they kind of don't fit into these categories. That makes sense.
Yeah. And so H.G. Wells had some ideas that we would reject wholeheartedly, and then he had some ones that were like, oh, that was kind of based. So one thing that he believed very deeply, and he actually wrote about this in one of his books later on. I forget what the book was called, but it was pretty much outlined his vision for the world. And this was that there was a global one world government, and there was a caste system where you had shareholders at the top. You had scientists down below that facilitated everything. Scientists pretty much ran the world. Then you had everybody else, which was of functional intellect, which had your workers, your warriors, your landowners, like, you know, everybody, the Carls, right? And then he had what he called the abyss, right? Which was like the bottom rung people. And he was a eugenicist. He believed that these people should be deprived of resources. He believed that these people were like, he was of the mind that if you were under a certain IQ, then we should try to prune you from the gene pool. He was pretty hardcore with this.
Yeah. This was actually something that was very common in progressive circles in the early 20th century, which is a bit strange because, you know, we think of progressives today as being completely against eugenics, and they are. But back then it was seen as like eugenics was seen like as a sort of extension of progress, or like a vehicle by which progress could be accelerated and continued and all of that. So, I mean, it's, you know, you said before about how great men don't always fit into categories. In some sense, even like the categories that were, you know, of this time, like, you know, we would think of back then in the first decade of the 20th century, the progressives would have been considered, you know, liberal or left or center left or whatever. But in some ways, they kind of don't even fit into that. Like, they certainly don't fit into a left-wing perspective now. And it's not just because, you know, everything's moved to the left. It's because there's something kind of qualitatively different about them. But yes, they were very, very strong on eugenics. And you know, it's very interesting. And we'll talk about this because they, you know, the progressive wing of politics at that point did wield some power, did end up, you know, implementing some of its eugenic policies. And well, look where we are today. I mean, how did that work out for us?
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, yeah, continue with H.G. Wells.
So H.G. Wells, one thing that he disagreed very, very strongly with guys like Lenin about was that he was a Fabian. He believed that violent revolution was brutish and retarded, and and it's not going to yield proper fruits. He very much believed that the violent revolution was a way to get you into a worse situation. He said the only way to do it was through attrition and incremental change and pressure upon society from the elites. And the way that, and he got a lot of influence from the elites. Like I said before, he went on to help influence. He created the idea for the League of Nations. This guy who's a scientist and a science fiction writer and an intellectual. It's hard to think of that today because we associate science fiction writers with being just kind of like nerds, right? That have no social power. Back in the day here, back in these times, the late 1800s, early 1900s, fiction writers were in the mix with intellectuals. They were in the mix with political movements and great thinkers and like all of this kind of great artists and all kind of stuff. They weren't just like this little niche thing. They were regarded as men of like visionary capabilities. But the way that H.G. Wells kind of got his way into like elite circles was literally by laying pipe. Like this guy laid pipe. Like I mentioned before, he married his first wife, which was actually his cousin. He married his cousin. They had kids, and he cheated on her with the Fabian Society dude's wife. And then he goes on to get hooked up with. He's just notorious for all of these affairs. He just could not stop. Complete sex addict, I guess. Right. So he went on to he went to meet with a baron in Russia and banged his mistress and took her away. He got with a feminist writer during the time named Rebecca West, started banging her, and she was an affair from his previous wife. So he was with his one wife while she was real pregnant. He even wrote about this, that she could not fulfill her duties as a wife, so therefore he is allowed to go do whatever he wants. So he went and started banging this other lady, Rebecca West, and then got her pregnant, right? And he actually ended up living in this polyamorous, like polygamy kind of household with these two pregnant ladies. Well, where they both had babies like within months of each other. Well, during this time, he used his connection to Rebecca West to go in and actually bang Margaret Sanger, right? The lady that was the advocate for like birth control and contraception at that time. He just had this thing for these kind of radical women. He liked to pipe them down, and he was not. You could not peg him as a feminist. This guy was very virile, and he said that women are there to serve men, and he was not a feminist. So why these women, these like activist feminists, like progressive women during the time would get in bed with him is just, it's not beyond me. They still do it. They like that.
There's some weird psychological stuff going on with that for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, that Baron, he starts smashing her mistress, takes her away from him, and then just like all kinds of stuff. And actually that woman stayed with him until he later died in when did he die? I forget when he died. 1946. So this guy was he piped his way into elite circles by smashing all these women of note, and went on to influence the League of Nations, which was he was ecstatic about. It was like his dream. And then what happened? He said that it was retarded and he hated it, so he bounced out
naturally.
But anyway, that's H.G. Wells. He was completely wild. He was a socialist. He was a eugenicist. He believed in this horrible idea of this globalist caste system. Well, that caste systems are bad, but his idea of a caste system where scientists run the world is just a complete nightmare for all of us. But it influenced him to write some pretty cool stories that were actually not really in favor of his ideology. This is this is something that's really fascinating about H.G. Wells, is that when he put pen to paper and he wrote fiction stories, he wrote stories of what would have happened if his ideas go wrong, which is what, in my opinion, the Time Machine was. So, Mike, tell us about the Time Machine. I know you really like this story.
Yeah. So my encounter with this book was pretty formative for me. Reading it in high school. At the time, I mean, I'll go into this in a little bit of depth in a little while. But at the time, I was really a like atheist, like very much into. Like not like a shithead atheist or whatever, like that, like is just hostile to religion or anything like that, but just a very hard-headed kind of realist outlook on life and everything like that. And this caused me to read. It caused me to read like Darwin and everything like that, and I was just really getting into I guess like a kind of I love science, proto I love science thing or whatever. So reading this in high school was a real it was a real red pill for me. And like one of the things that like you look back on your own journey into this thing, wherever we are into like, the nationalist scene or whatever. There's like, I always think, what was my turning point? And I keep like pushing it back further and further. One of the earliest red pills for me was just actually reading 19th century literature, like nothing to do with politics or anything, because it's always been obvious to me that we have been declining phenotypically and genotypically for a very long time. I mean, I think I've been aware of this most of my life, really. So yeah, like one of my biggest red pills against progressivism as an ideology in general was just reading 19th century literature. So like, yeah, when I was in high school, I was like kind of one of these proto-Dawkins atheists, I guess. Not really bad, but yeah, just like a hard-headed realist type, not unlike, Ed Dutton. And me and one of my buddies would like sit there and we'd like analyze our peer group in terms of evolutionary psychology, right? Like just to be little shitheads, kind of like, like kids in the 90s all were, just really, I'm struggling to find the word here, but it was just a sort of very bleak outlook or whatever. Like we'd be like watching kids, play stupid games and win stupid prizes, and then just be like, oh, that's natural selection at work right there, right? Or like looking at the nerd guy in high school and going like, that one will have few opportunities for intercourse, like just like it's a nature documentary or something. So I figured that at one point, I figured that I'd actually like, I'm getting into science and Darwinism and everything like that. I would get the shit straight from the horse's mouth and just like actually read Charles Darwin. So that's exactly what I did. And holy fuck, dude. Like this was like getting hit by a train. You know what I mean? Like just cracking open The Origin of Species and reading it. It's not that difficult of a book by the standards of the time. It's obviously radical and it's a work of genius, but it's not like it's impenetrable. It's not like reading Hegel or something like that. But for me at the time, it kind of was. It's like when guys were sort of in the wake of the Roman Empire, after the empire had collapsed and like a century or so had elapsed and everything had kind of devolved down to like a lower state of social organization. People would be sort of like wandering amid the ruins, like everything's starting to fall apart or whatever, and look at like the Roman, bathhouses and things that they constructed in, like provincial, like far-flung areas of the empire, like England, and just be like, what kind of giants built this? You know what I mean? Like, so far above what we can do now, right? And that was the effect of reading Origin of Species at this time in my life. I mean, like, Darwin is not exactly a masterful prose stylist, but it became obvious to me just from his writing that the level of discourse at that time, like from the 19th century, middle of the 19th century to like World War One, let's say, was far above what it is today. And then I started reading other old literature around this time, things like Tolkien, Lovecraft, classics like myths and legends, and a lot of which, you know, editions from the 19th century republished or whatever. And it turns out that it wasn't just Darwin. It was everyone at this time was basically just like far smarter and more visionary than anybody has been in a long time. And this includes classic sci-fi like H.G. Wells. So for me, reading this book in high school was really formative because it was one of the first times where I really started to think about human, like, you know, where we're going as a species and like what the long-term sort of trajectories could be where we're going. Which of course that, like, this is the core of this book. It's a pretty short book. I mean, I recommend to anybody that has not read The Time Machine, you have to read it. It's like, I would put it in, it easily makes my top 20 books. And it's pretty short. It's like less than 100 pages or so. But yeah, so I'm without going into a lot of detail, just to give a quick plot summary. It's kind of interesting because it's like a frame story. There's like a story within a story, and the frame is that there's this inventor. I forget what they call him in the story, but he's like giving a dinner party and he's invited guests to it and everything like that. And he has this this little machine that he says that he can send forward or backwards in time, and he does a little demonstration. He like flips a switch and the thing disappears, and he explains how it's now 5 minutes into the future or something like that, and that's why it went away. And they kind of, some of them believe him, some don't. And then he says that he's going to like, he shows them a larger machine that's like, you know, able to do the same thing. And he says that he's going to like send himself forward with this machine, and then you know, he'll see you next week at dinner or whatever. And so then like the story then transitions to him having done that, and he's gone super far forward into the future. There's like this very interesting, very like well written, lots of nice imagery of like what it looks like just in the time machine, like just going through hundreds of thousands of years worth of time in, you know, a few minutes or something like that. Like how the sun just like turns into this band across the sky because he's going so fast, and how it's like going up and down through the sky as the seasons change. And it's like just that starts going at like Mach 5 speed, you know what I mean? And he ends up in the year, like, I forget what the actual year number is, but it's like 800,000 years in the future. And to give guys a bit of a context here, human beings have only been anatomically modern for like 200,000 years. So this is way far into the future. And he goes into the future and he discovers these, like, you know, humans. Basically, he comes across these humans, and they are really sort of like, they're smaller, they're weaker, they're you know, not very there's like no violence among them or anything. They're very peaceful. They live a very idyllic life, basically, and they're harmless and everything, and they're almost like these little pets or something. And he's like, oh, well, I guess what's happened is that, you know, a socialist revolution at some point in the remote past, you know, compared to the relative to where he is, somehow eliminated all violence, and then humans evolved to basically work in peace and harmony. And, you know, it's basically like a socialist utopia. And for however long, that's where we are now. Humans have sort of evolved around that. Right. Okay. Great. But there's something kind of weird going on with these like, humans in the future, because they're really afraid of the dark. And there's like they have some weird hangups about like going to certain places and everything. And
they're called the Eloi, right?
the Eloi, or I don't know how you pronounce that.
Eloi.
Yes, that's right. So these Eloi, they are, they're just like basically sort of like, it's like humans if they were ultra domesticated or something like that. I think that's how I would describe it.
They're like little Pokemon humans.
Yeah, exactly. So I forget exactly what the sequence of events is, but he discovers that there is sort of like this underground, like there's something going on, like there's these wells that are sort of around the landscape, and he can hear that there's something going on. It sounds like machinery going on inside them, and there's like air coming out and everything. So he finds his way into like a cavern or some sort of like a labyrinth or whatever, and like investigates, goes beneath there. And long story short, he finds this other race of humans that have evolved in exactly the opposite direction of the Eloi. And these are called the Morlocks. And the Morlocks are, they're just, they've evolved into these like hyper predatory subterranean night dwellers that just come out and predate on the Eloi, right? They hunt them and they kill them and they eat them. And through the course of the story, he befriends one of these Eloi, and there's like a whole dramatic arc with them and everything. And basically what happens is he conjectures that what actually caused this state of affairs was, in the context of his own day, there's starting to be like a very distinct, sharp class divide between the proletariat and the capitalists, right? Like the owners of the means of production and the people who actually do the work. And he conjectures that this divide just kept growing and growing and growing. And basically the two like classes eventually, over a very, very long period of time, grew up so far apart that they became distinct species, and that the Eloi originally were sort of like exploiting and it's essentially predatory upon the Morlocks. But at some stage over a long period of evolution, the tables turned, right? And the Eloi, because they didn't have to do any work and they were obviously living lives of like ease and luxury and domestication and everything, they became soft, and eventually the Morlocks, who were effectively the workhorses of the Eloi, got to a point where they were essentially able to become the masters, and they would hunt them and everything, and the story proceeds from there. And just to sort of wrap up the synopsis, he's like going through the underground cavern or whatever with one of the Eloi. The Morlocks discover them, and there's a big chase scene, and then they go back to the time machine, and I forget what happens to his like companion, but he himself gets in,
right?
Is that it? Yeah. Okay. He goes back to the time machine, heads back to, actually before he goes back to his own time, he heads forward into the distant future, and he sees like, the sun is grown into like a red giant, and it's there's like all these weird life forms sort of like moving on this like beach in the autumnal sort of like massive red sun. It's got like, they're like these huge crabs, and he goes further forward, and there's this like giant black blob is like the only like living thing on Earth or whatever. And then he goes back from there, heads back to his own time, and he bursts into his drawing room. The people are already there, like, the next week or whatever for dinner, and he proceeds to tell them the story that I've just related here. So that's kind of how the frame story intersects with the actual narrative. So what's interesting about this story is it really is like one of the first stories that I'm aware of that places man into a evolutionary context and uses evolution itself as an engine that drives the narrative forward. This is really interesting, and it really hit me hard when I first read that. I was just like, holy shit, this is like, this is not just like a little sort of cutesy fairy tale or something, and it's not even a supposedly deep story like one of the ones that you'd be given in like to read in high school, like Catcher in the Rye or whatever, or of Mason Men. This is something that's like really getting at something quite profound here, and it's trying to look forward into the future and see like what is the long-term trajectory of human evolution, what are the implications of something like class warfare, and so on and so forth. It's very, very profound work. It really puts a lot of sci-fi is kind of trashy, but like there is some definitely interesting stuff out there in the 20th century. But this is like it really stands tall above anything else. But it's so short that it's like it's different beast than something like Dune or Asimov or whatever. But it's just so interesting, and like what it's trying to do. It's just so ambitious in its scope and what it's trying, the questions it's trying to answer and everything like that. So this was, for me, I remember just being in love with it when I read it. I've been about like 14 or 15 years old or something like that. And I still remember it to this day. It's kind of made its mark on me. So yeah, the Time Machine it was totally formative moment for me reading it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting book, and Wells himself was so interesting because as I mentioned before, he doesn't fall into any categories. He sort of has these dualities of belief, right? He is a socialist, so he very much views like exploitation as a really bad thing, but he also disagrees with class warfare, with the class struggle, which is was a key element of socialism at this time. He thought that class struggle was just you were just like sowing the seeds for later destruction, right? You were just setting it up for failure later on. He very much saw this, and it gets illustrated in this story as well. And his big moral of this story, and also some of his other stories, is when you exploit a group of people for too long, eventually you're going to pay the price, right? This whole thing starts out with the Eloi or the Eloi. They exploit the Morlocks for so long that eventually they get soft and weak. And although he is somewhat of a past, he's very anti-war throughout his life. Which is kind of strange. Here's another cool thing about H.G. Wells. He invented tabletop wargaming. He codified it with two books. One was called Floor Games. The other one was called Little Wars. So you guys out there that like Warhammer 40K can thank H.G. Wells for literally inventing a codified rule set for this, right? Which is pretty interesting. He at one time he was hanging out with one of his boys named Jerome was the guy's name. He was another British guy. So him and Jerome, they were just hanging out in the study, like getting drunk, just broing out. And his buddy Jerome built a little cannon that could actually shoot. So they started setting up toy soldiers and shooting them with this cannon. And he's like, I'm going to make rules. Let's make rules for this. So he made rules for it. And then now we have tabletop gaming. Tabletop gaming, period, was sort of invented by him. So that's another thing.
Quite a dude. A real turning point in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So he was absolutely. And like, it just, isn't that interesting? This guy was so brilliant. Just it is off. Just like some little side quest in his life, he invented like a huge staple that people still do today, right? A huge cultural hobby that people still do today. But anyway, in this, he says two things. One of them, in his, I believe in his rule set, he claimed his game to be the war that ends all wars. This is how we describe World War One. People attribute it to Woodrow Wilson, but Woodrow Wilson actually borrowed it from H.G. Wells. Two, he says that in the book, he's like, isn't this so much better than the real thing? He very much viewed war and imperialism and all this kind of stuff as a waste of good human stock, right? He thought that sending
which was right. I mean, like World War One, it's been argued like the reason why the West collapsed so precipitously after, in the 20th century, second half of the 20th century, is because essentially the genetic stock got like completely gutted during World War One. So I think he's onto something there.
Yeah, he's not wrong. This is something that we say in our circles all the time, is that of course we're where we're at now because we had two gigantic wars that wiped out the strongest and brightest of our stock. You know what I mean? Or at least like a huge portion of them. People don't realize how many people died in those two wars. It's unbelievable. It was almost, you might as well have just had another bubonic plague. You know what I mean? It was really, really incredible. But anyway, with H.G. Wells, he very much viewed this idea of exploitation coming back to bite you. And he also talks about it in his, this is sort of the narrative in his book, The War of the Worlds, which is, it was an invasion story. He actually came up with the idea for it because him and his brother were out just like hiking and broing out in the woods. And his brother said something of like, what if life forms started dropping down from the sky? Or it was just like some weird idea popped in his head. And Wells wrote it into War of the Worlds, which is another story. This is actually the one that I read from Wells first. Was War of the Worlds. And pretty much the story of World of Worlds is, you guys already know, you've probably seen the movie. The movie is actually a fairly good adaptation of the book. It's England. A bunch of weird aliens come down with technology that nobody can even fathom. They begin just wiping out humanity and colonizing Earth. And eventually they can't live in our atmosphere, so they begin dying and they croak, and then that's it. So it's like they can't survive there, right? So it's like this idea that if you go to this foreign place and you try to exploit and colonize it, eventually you can't maintain that. That's not sustainable, is what he's kind of sort of saying.
I think if I'm not mistaken, and I could be mistaken, what kills them is actually like bacteria or like a virus or something like that. But it's basically the same thing, right? It's like what amounts to essentially the environment or something that's like the most ancient possible foe that we could have, which is disease, is the thing that kills them. So it's like super ironic that this intensely advanced form of life that comes and basically starts like wiping out humanity, like poses an existential threat, and like we just have no idea how we're going to deal with this like possibly catastrophic apocalyptic crisis, ends up getting solved by itself by something as prosaic as like a virus kills them off or whatever it is. So it's War of the Worlds is a fascinating book in and of itself as well, and like would be worthy of like an episode in itself. But again, what makes it interesting and profound is this sort of tension that Wells writes into it about how, something so advanced cannot stand up against nature, basically the oldest thing, right? Like the environment or like some like a bacterium or something. That's what makes his writing really good. And like it's sci-fi, but it's not like sci-fi like Star Trek kind of. I always shit on Star Trek, but it's not like that kind of sci-fi where it's just kind of boring ass stories like in a setting that nerds like. It's actually, there's some serious ideas going on in these stories. Time Machine's like that. War of the Worlds is like that. Those are the only two that I've read by him, but I'm sure a lot of his other writings have that too. And the guy was so prolific too. I had to look at his bibliography. It's like between like books and articles, like this guy had been writing all day, every day for like his whole adult life. It was just crazy how prolific he was.
And he had time to pipe all these broads, and and there was also he was also a pretty decent artist too. In his diaries, he did a lot of sketch work and stuff like that. He was actually pretty good at drawing too. Really, really brilliant man. Really brilliant man. And as I mentioned before about, when you look at guys like this, yeah, he was a socialist and a globalist and all this kind of stuff. He was also kind of problematic for progressives of his time, because he had these radically different ideas of how things should be. And he agreed with these guys over here and didn't agree with these guys, and would join organizations and then said that they sucked, and forcefully changed them and subverted them and to his vision, because he was probably a narcissist. He was very probably a narcissist. Certainly a very charismatic guy. He was, you don't bet all these women if you're not a charismatic guy. So he was a very interesting character, and he sort of had a chip on his shoulder his whole life, because he wanted to be considered one of the elite. So he wrote and fought and worked and sexed his way into trying to become one of, which he never really got to be. You know what I mean? So this is his worldview to us is somewhat monstrous, right? This idea that scientists run the world in this global social thing. But that's also monstrous to leftists now. Like they would hate H.G. Wells' idea of the world, right? They would never want that. His idea would be,
they fucking love science, but they fucking love science that's like retarded and completely like non-scientific and like doesn't actually answer to reality or whatever. But his kind of did, right? So that they would hate him for that.
So yeah, and here's the thing is, when you look at a guy like Wells, who is sort of his own guy and kind of against everybody, you have to look at his individual positions and say, was he wrong? Was he, guys like us would probably have a visceral reaction to his pseudo pacifism, but in his critique of imperialism and colonizing other places, we very much have this reaction to defend that, because that is the critique that is levied against us, that we're so evil because we did that. But, or not necessarily we, but, our cultures or adjacent cultures or the elites of our cultures, et cetera, et cetera. But is he wrong? Did those things actually pan out for us? I would say that going and getting involved with the slave trade is absolutely one of the most terrible ideas we ever had.
Oh yeah. Nick Land has this saying that cheap cotton is the most expensive thing that has ever existed in the history of humankind, right?
Oh my God.
You know where he's coming from, right? Like H.G. Wells might have seen that. Like, yeah.
And things like you go back to ancients, was it really beneficial to Rome to go colonize like North Africa? Did that work out for them? Did it work out for them to try to go into Germania and like try to conquer those people and take them over? Those guys, both of those cultures came and like sacked Rome at some point. You know what I mean? So has the world policing of the United States, the global American empire, been helpful for the American people? No, not at all, because we destabilize countries, and now those people are these people don't just disappear. You can't really just exterminate and vanish a people is really hard to do. Diseases can't even do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You think us with bombs and guns and stuff like that can do it? No, those people are going to be around whether we like it or not after what we do to them, and they're going to hate us, right? We see this today in the Middle East with these forever wars that we have, where now we have second and third generation insurgents fighting us that have been born and bred to hate America, to hate Americans. They have, their fathers and their grandfathers have fought against America for generations now. That's not cool. Like those are the kind
That's
of
their tradition. Their tradition is fuck America, right?
yeah. That's not a good position to be in.
Yeah, you don't want to
have that.
create anything like that. That's like a, you know, monster that's going to come back to bite you.
And we have to understand that, you know, in the ancient world, things were a little bit different, but now in the industrial era, it's just like to go and do these kinds of things, these foreign countries. It's just, you know, H.G. Wells, he wasn't wrong with this idea of going and exploiting foreign peoples and colonizing them. And I'm not doing I'm saying pragmatically, in the end, it ends up bad for us.
Yeah, we're not talking about some sort of, you know, universal framing of morality or whatever. It's just, yeah, from a purely pragmatic standpoint, basically what you're doing is you're just accelerating yourself towards the end of his historical cycle. And it's like, it's as inevitable as, you know, that fall it gives way to winter, right? Like it's just going to happen, or night follows day. So yeah.
People don't forget. Also think about it like this. If you go conquering the shit out of somebody and you take all their resources and you do all this kind of stuff, and the Indo-Europeans had, you know, if you're going to do that, they had a good system. You stay there and you build a society over theirs. They would pretty much just like get rid of all the men, impregnate all of the women, and make them a bottom caste, and then rule over them till the end of time, until it becomes like India, right? That's how they or Europe, right? Europe is the same way. So we couldn't do that now, right? So here's the thing we got to remember is that civilizations go in cycles, and a lot of these peoples, they've had civilizations in the past. A lot of the Levantine
Mesopotamia.
Yeah, Mesopotamian people, they've had civilization in the past. You know, Iran has had civilization in the past. Civilization is not unique to Europe, right? So when you go and you blow these people up and you piss them off, there's going to be a time where our civilization goes down and theirs goes up, and they won't forget. And if the tables turn and they come for us, they're not going to be nice. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. So he was very much onto something, H.G. Wells. You know, we're not anti-war pacifists or whatever, but there's just pragmatic reasons why that's just stupid. Another one of the things that he was very strong on, as were a lot of people at this time, this was sort of in the air, just as part of, you know, liberalism as a progressive movement. And I mean, we shit on liberalism, you know, from sun up to sundown, and that's justified 100%. But, you know, certainly you can there's gradations within a thing, right? Like it could be more or less based or shitty, as the case may be. And of course, liberalism was never anything really very good, but there was times when it was at least more workable and had, like, you know, something kind of going for it. And certainly in the 19th century, I regard the 19th century as really the height of like Western civilization, at least in terms of scientific and intellectual power. But at this time, one of the things that was in the air is the idea of eugenics, as we touched on, but also dysgenics, the idea that the worry that if the lower classes, and not just the lower classes, but the less intelligent, were to reproduce too quickly, or to outpace the reproductive capacity of the more intelligent of the elite or upper classes, the worry was that human beings would deteriorate. This was very, very, you know, discussed very much in intellectual circles, in scientific circles. Like, these people were not afraid to look reality square in the face and to call a spade, and really, like, just not mince words, right? You know, people like Herbert Spencer, who was just like a complete, like, Manchester liberal type or whatever, was also kind of based in this way, right? Like he was, like, a lot of people at this time were very much concerned with dysgenics and the idea that like the human genome was deteriorating, would deteriorate if it wasn't maintained. And they kind of, I don't know if it was like expressed in these terms or whatever, but certainly it was understood at least, at the gut level, that the Industrial Revolution had brought about very easy conditions, and that people were, that there was a lower child mortality rate, there was more abundance and everything, and this basically allowed the weak and stupid to proliferate. And this is basically, in politer terms, but still the same terms as the way it would have been discussed at that time. You'd never be able to get away with saying anything like that in polite company today. And Imperium Press is, by the time this episode drops, the pre-order will have been out for about a week or so, and we'll be actually taking orders for the new Ed Dutton book, which is called Breeding the Human Herd. And this is what it is all about. It's an excellent summary of Dutton's thought. I think it's maybe his best book. It's certainly one of his best books, where he ties together a lot of the threads of his ideas. And the whole idea behind it, in a nutshell, is that if you take that, that the old phrase that strong men make for good times and good times make for weak men, well, you are here right now, right? Like you're at the good times and the weak men part. The strong men were the giants of the scientific and the Industrial Revolution. They created an environment of relaxed natural selection. And as I said, this allowed the weak and stupid to multiply. And now we're witnessing the decline of, and we have been for a century, witnessing the decline of things like intelligence, of moral character, which would have been called at the time, or which we call now pro-social personality, because, people don't like moral f***ing. You're not allowed to talk about that, at least as a scientist. Religiosity is declining, mental health is declining, even physical health is declining, right? Mm-hmm. These are highly adapted traits that require a huge amount of, let's just say, energy investment by a biological organism to maintain. They're biologically expensive traits that could be maintained only in a harsh environment, a stable environment. Like the harshness of the environment drives these traits kind of to the utmost, like heights of adaptivity, and the stability drives them in the same direction for a prolonged period. But after the Industrial Revolution, basically what happened was that this harsh environment changed. Everything got easier. Food became more abundant. As I say, child mortality dropped from like 50% to 1% over the course of a century or so. Suddenly, all the fruit was suddenly a lot more low hanging, shall we say. Survival became much, much easier, and people started having fewer children, having them later, having higher time preference. They started, engaging in criminality, getting addicted to things, becoming more individualistic, more egalitarian, and frankly, more liberal, right? Like all these are dysgenic symptoms. They're all luxuries that can only be maintained in an environment of artificial plenty. Like a biologist like Dutton would say that, Darwinian natural selection pressures were relaxed. And as a result, these expensive traits, they were no longer needed, right? And in fact, some of the opposite traits started to be selected for. So these adaptive traits have been in free fall for like a century and a half. It's terrifying to look at. And of course, you can't tell liberals this. They will completely deny it. It's just like they get their blinders on, right? IQ has declined by something like 10% in the past 100 years. Think of what I said before about how humans have been around as humans for like 200,000 years. And we've lost 10% of our brain power in, what is that? Like, half of 1% or half of 0.05% of that time, right? That's absolutely insane. These traits are in free fall. People are weaker than ever before, physically weaker. If you like, even just something as prosaic as grip strength has like completely, it's just falling away generation after generation. Allergies are on the rise. Antisocial traits like the dark triad traits, like narcissism and so on, those are on the rise. And in the book, Ed Dutton lays out the rise and fall of intelligence and genetic fitness, like more broadly, sort of over the course of basically since the Industrial Revolution. And then later in the book, he kind of takes up the question of whether eugenics will save us. Spoiler alert, he's pretty fucking black-pilled about that. And so am I, but for very different reasons. And anyway, this is all just to say that H.G. Wells and Ed Dutton would have seen very much eye to eye on a lot of this stuff. There's definitely a dysgenic effect that was foreseen at that time by people like Wells, by others that were eugenicists, which most liberals were at that point. There's definitely a dysgenic effect that has continued and shows no signs of stopping. So yes, it's. I thought it would be actually interesting to discuss H.G. Wells and like in connection with Dutton's book, because they're both talking about eugenics and dysgenics and the future of the human species and everything like that, which is something that even though we in the radical right are not afraid to talk about these things, still it kind of doesn't really get discussed all that much. I mean, a lot of guys will talk about eugenics and things like that, and evolutionary psychology. This is a huge part of what we're all about. But like talking about like the long-term future of the human species doesn't actually get discussed all that much. And I'm really glad to see that it is getting, in Dutton, that it's getting a voice in our scene. Yeah.
When I read this kind of stuff, when I read ideas about the direction of the world, or whether it be political or what have you, I usually try to make sure that it is in line with what I'm actually experiencing. Right. I sort of have this problem with people that read books and develop this idea about the world and not matching it with anecdotal, experiential data. Right. It's like, well, this is how things are in this country, but they've never actually been there, like talk to those people in that country, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And the dysgenic, the de-evolution of the human species is something you can witness. Right. I went to the store sort of recently, and I remember looking around this store and I'm like, these are some ugly, fucked up people. There's like, I saw this whole family of people that were just, they looked like the hills have eyes. I was like, I can't even remember like seeing like an entire group of people this hideous, like in years past. They were morbidly obese. They had weird color hair. They're all ugly in the face. The one guy was in a wheelchair. Another guy's limping around. He's got some sort of weird machine on his belt with tubes going into him. Like they're just being kept alive by machines and medication. Yeah. And they're just like dead in the eyes. It's just like, what the hell? You know what I mean? And it wasn't even like there was just like this one fan. I look around, it's like everybody is retarded. Like these people, they're just like, I don't know. And I feel that I don't know. I this last weekend I had an experience that kind of changed my mind on some things. I went to, I don't want to give too many details because it's something in my personal life, but I had to go associate with some people that I actually grew up with, that I went to school with, as some townies, right? Some folks from the neighborhood. And I remember thinking like, these people are just, I don't know if it's here's something that I've noticed as well, is that people that don't read and people that don't keep up with their learning, it's like people that never ever go to the gym and just completely abandon their health. They eventually just turn into blobs, right? They just turn into pieces of crap. If if you don't read and you don't keep up with your mind, even if you're not like a super genius, you could just be of regular intelligence. If like after school you just stop reading, you stop learning, you just kind of like labor away and go home and watch TV, you're eventually gonna get dull. And one thing I've noticed is that folks that I went to school with that I used to think were bright, I ran into a guy sort of recently that I was like pretty good buddies with, and he was like, he used to write poetry, some really good poetry too. As a teenager, he was a singer in a band. Wasn't a great singer, but he was a pretty good singer. He's a good performer. He used to do sketch work. He draw. He was just like a talented guy, an intelligent, talented guy. I ran into him again, and he was like a dull in the eyes, a complete retard. And I was like, whatever happened to all that, you still do music? He's like, oh, no, I don't do. I was like, you still do art or do you write? He's like, oh, no, he doesn't read. He doesn't do it. It's like,
I just watch Netflix. That's what I do. That's my hobby.
It's
sad.
It's sad. And I'm noticing that the younger generations of young men, like me and my friends in my generation, we were boneheads, right? We were. No, you can't go into a group of teenagers and like expect to hear you can't go to a group of teenagers anytime in history and not hear some retarded stuff, right? It's just young men are retards. But among that, me and my friends and people that I associated my peer group when we were younger, among the retarded stuff, we had intelligent things to say. We would have meaningful conversations about things. You know what I mean? We would talk about, whatever things that are abstract and weird. And you could sit down with just about not anybody, but most people you could sit down and have an interesting conversation with them. I sit when I go to the gym and I sit in the sauna, or I sit and I listen to these younger generations talk. I never hear anything. In fact, they communicate in one word answers a lot. It's like you can't even like, I don't know, dude. I don't know. So this last weekend when I was among these townies, it was like I was among retards. These people were just not smart. And it's not like I was trying to come in and talk about fucking philosophy or anything with them, but they just yak meaningless things. And like anytime I would try to elevate the conversation, they like looked at me like I was a retard. You know what I mean? They would just like kind of like look at me like, what the fuck? Why do you know that? Like, what are you even talking about? Like I'm the piece of shit. So I'm seeing in real time physical health and all of these things decline. And, I think people have a reaction to it, guys in our thing, because it's really hard to accept that physically we're not as good as we should be. I will admit to you guys, physically, intellectually, I am not on the level as my grandfather and great-grandfather. My great-grandfather would have whipped my ass, and he would have outwritten me. He would have outthought me. He would have outperformed me by all metrics. My grandfather as well. These guys were brilliant, brilliant men. And I like to think that I'm a pretty smart guy because I am their grandson. And I'm very grateful for that gift that they've given me. But I am not on their level. And I'm first to admit that I have back problems. I have joint problems. I have blood sugar problems. I have so I have some health problems. You know what I mean? I am dysgenic, right?
Well, I mean, aren't we all, right? Like,
exactly.
This is the story that's being told here that Dutton has, and this is not the first book where he's done it. This definitely the one that we put out is the one where he ties all these threads together. Somewhere like from 1870, which is probably roughly about like the phenotypic peak of intelligence in the Western world, to let's just say 2020, so 150 years, we've lost probably at least 15 IQ points, and maybe more than that. Yeah, that's just assuming something like a 1 IQ per decade loss, and it might actually be even higher. It might be significantly higher than that. But assuming that, the difference between 115 IQ person and a 100 IQ person is like the difference between a school teacher and, you know, a somebody that like teaches at a like community college or something like that. It's quite a significant difference. And this has been going on for quite some time. It's probably been going on like, the downward pressure has been going on for a long time, but the actual like the decline in intelligence, it's really only started in sort of like the late 1800s. But this is in the aggregate, right? Of course, like, some people like their son is going to be smarter than them. But we're not talking about some people or exceptions. We're talking about the average. The story there is very clear. And it's interesting because this is something that has existed before. This is like, we're not the first ones to point out the idea of decline, that our fathers were better than we are. And of course, the thing, though, is that in our culture, we are taught to believe that we're, in fact, better than our fathers. Whereas it seems to me, just anecdotally, like if you look across the sweep of history, if you see a culture that is vital and that actually has, like, it's on the upswing and it's on the ascent, probably what it believes is that its fathers were superior to itself. Whereas if you see a culture on the decline, it believes the opposite. It believes that it's the superior of its own fathers. And that's exactly what we believe today. Its general wisdom says that we're more moral than our ancestors were. It says that we can do more. Well, we can do more, of course, but that is basically down to social technology. But the conventional wisdom of today says that we're more intelligent than they were, that our understanding is richer and deeper, and that we have a better sweep of history, a better understanding of history than they did. That's all complete and utter fucking gobbledygook. We definitely do not have any of those things. We are certainly their moral inferiors. We're their intellectual inferiors, inferior in so many ways. This is not like kind of like sighing, like Hesiodic, oh, woe is us, like everything's getting shitty forever. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that things go in cycles, and that we're on the other side of a peak now, and that things are starting to come down very quickly. But this is not the first time that's happened. And it's not the first time that men have observed that their fathers were better than themselves. There is a phrase that keeps recurring in Homer. I didn't look it up for this episode, but I didn't look up what the actual Greek phrase was. But what it translates to is weak as men are now. So what'll be happening is something's going on. There's action happening in the Iliad where, like they'll be talking about how Ajax lifted this like gigantic boulder and like threw it and like smashed 6 guys with it or something crazy like that. And they'll be talking about how like he lifted this boulder that, weak as men are now, no 2 people could even lift, but he lifted it by himself. Like this phrase is like a recurring phrase in Homeric poetry, especially in the Iliad. Imagine that. Like just think about what that means for weak as men are now to be in Homer. Like, for fuck's sake. It really is. It's quite humbling. And also in Homer, there's an episode in the Odyssey, which is very, very instructive, where when Odysseus comes back, the famous, scene of his homecoming, he comes back, he finds his palace in disarray, he finds all these people trying to bang his wife, and he's not a happy camper. So what he does is he concocts this ruse where he goes into he basically like goes incognito under the color of being like a beggar into his own palace, and he basically challenges these suitors that are trying to like get with his wife. He challenges them to a duel, to a contest, and the contest is you have to string Odysseus's bow, and they don't know that it's him, so they think he's still gone. The challenge is that you have to string his bow and shoot an arrow through 10 axe heads or something like that. And all of the suitors, one by one, they keep trying to string the bow, and they can't do it, right? They just cannot lift the bow of Ulysses. And this bow of Ulysses metaphor is something that recurs through history. What the bow of Ulysses is it's the thing that we're not good enough to do anymore, that we used to be able to do, kind of thing. There's actually a famous book called Bow of Ulysses, written by a guy named James Anthony Froude, which is basically, it's like an extremely racist and spicy book about how only white people can lift the bow of Ulysses, and all these inferior races can't do it, and so on and so forth. But yeah, what I'm trying to say here is that this metaphor has been around forever, right? People have noticed that we're not as good as our fathers forever. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. But this is definitely something that's coming back. And we in the radical right, we're the prime noticers. We're the noticers extraordinaire. And we have noticed that we are not as good as our fathers, even though, obviously boomers have their own retarded worldview, and it's completely out to lunch in certain ways. But we're not as smart as them. We're not as resilient as them. We don't have as much, we have higher time preference than them. We're more prone to addiction than them. We're physically weaker than them, and so on and so forth. And this is just where we're at, right? So this is something that we need to reckon with. Probably very few political movements that are around today would be willing to actually admit to this, to just look reality in the face and admit to it. But we can, and this in some ways gives us sort of a unique advantage, at least in terms of truth tracking vis-a-vis these other movements.
Yeah, and for folks that don't believe it, man, look at the strongman tournaments and everything. Some of the strongest dudes on record today, there are guys that hold records for strongest man ever from 1800s. That we can't beat today. There's a guy named I don't know how to say his name. His name was Louis Cyr. He was a C-Y-R. I don't know how to pronounce that. Cyr. Louis Cyr. He was a strong man in the late 1800s. He's a French Canadian guy. This guy still holds multiple records that thousands upon thousands of guys today can't beat with steroids and sports science and nutrition. Yeah. This dude was just drinking milk and eating steaks and was just like this. This guy was strong from day one. He was said to be the strongest kid alive. He worked in a lumber yard his whole life, and everyone's wow. And then he goes on to just be the strongest man to ever live. This guy was 5'8", 300 pounds, just an absolute monster. He was called the Canadian Samson. Even in today, it's there was a dude that was in charge of the international bodybuilding organization. I can't remember what they're called, but he said that nobody will ever beat Louis Cyr. He is the strongest man to ever live. He cannot be beaten. He was a real life Hercules. And what's crazy is he's not the only one. There's a bunch of guys in that time period that were just strong as fuck. You can go look at pictures of them. They don't look all chiseled and ripped and huge like guys do now. Some of them just look kind of just husky, hefty dudes. And their level of strength, their grip naturally was we have to take drugs to be able to try to even match it, and we can't even beat it.
No.
It's incredible.
It's crazy, man. Yeah. It's evident. I mean, when I went back to one of the cities that I lived in Canada over the holidays, we went back for Christmas, and I just remember going there, and I mean, it was there was a big snowstorm, so people were not too happy, and it was kind of people were a little bit miserable or whatever. But when I would walk into a shop or whatever, I would just like look around and just the dead look in people's faces, and it just seemed like things had changed. Like it's been 10 years since I lived there now. And I mean, there's been demographic change, and like that's part of it too, but it's more than just that. It's like you can see decade after decade that like changes are in fact happening. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Like we are undergoing massive selection pressure right now. And I mean, it's very blackpilling. Like, you know, we're known for in the culture dads are known for like just doling out white pill after white pill after white pill. This is a little bit of a different thing here. I think this episode's, you know, there's got a little bit more black pill content in it. Yeah. However, there is a silver lining to all of this, I think, right? Which is that this is a natural cycle. It's something that like humans have gone through probably like hundreds of times since there have ever been humans, and we're going through it now. And what's interesting about it is that white people, for having been plagued by liberalism, basically, like, you know, from having had the smallpox disease of liberalism infest them first, have really sort of gone through it first and are kind of coming out the other side of it now, just starting to come out the other side of it as other peoples are beginning to go through it. We as a people, and in fact as a species now, are undergoing massive selection pressure. Modernity and liberalism have absolutely gutted white fertility. But we as peoples, as a folk group, are passing through this crucible. And the white pill, and this is not just Cope here, a lot of people agree with this, is that liberalism is in the process of doing the same thing to every one of our ethnic competitors, except we have a head start. We have already been hardened somewhat by this pressure. I mean, we've still got a ways to go. We're still going down, but we're not going down nearly as precipitously as all these other peoples. Like you can think of like, you know, what you know, what kind of shape is like your average Hispanic in the US in kind of thing, right? Like, so whereas, I mean, we've been somewhat hardened by this pressure. Like think about fertility just in and of itself. White fertility has mostly held steady in the last few years, last decade or so. It's gone down a little bit, but it's mostly pretty steady. Whereas other people's like TFR, their total fertility rate has just, it's in free fall, right? These people are suffering dysgenic pressure. They're fat, they're stupid, they're lazy, and increasingly they are less ethnocentric. These other peoples have not learned to live in heterogeneous societies as we have. We've imposed this on ourselves. They simply have not learned to live with liberalism, whereas we have adapted to it over centuries. And like the species, like the human species, is currently passing through a huge genetic bottleneck. I think like future geneticists, if there are any, are going to look back at this and see what amounts to an extinction event. Frankly, I think that's what you can call it. A huge amount of genetic material is simply dying out, especially like on the like Y chromosome, like on the male side. There's a massive reorganization of human life going on. It amounts to a slow motion collapse, like not a catastrophic collapse, like, you know, everybody, you know, it's kind of a meme in the dissident right that like, you know, we're all going to sort of like devolve down to, you know, living as hunter-gatherers or something. That's not going to happen, right? But there is a very slow motion collapse going on. It's what John Michael Greer calls catabolic collapse, where it's kind of like a staircase. Things go down quickly, then they level out, then they go down a bit more, then they level out, and that keeps going. That is happening right now. The lights might not go off, but the next century is going to look vastly different than what we have right now. And here's the upshot. If you want to survive it, if you want your family to survive this, you'd better get focused, and you better get focused in a big fucking hurry. This is our social technology that is like going to enable us to get through this. And it's being imposed on us to some degree already just by conditions, by like the natural environment. But it's also, this is part of the reason why, why Dave and I and others in the scene are trying to develop a focused worldview. Is to give us some like something to hook on to be able to, it's like a life preserver in this like hurricane that's like just starting to gather in mass around us. So yeah, there's a lot of, there's black pills flying all over the place, and there's good reason for that in the short term. In the long term, I think we've got actually a good outlook, but it doesn't mean that we can just like sit back and like let the dysgenic decline happen. We need to actually actively work and like build our social technology that's going to get us into a position where we can deal with it.
Yeah. I recently had a pretty cool conversation with a Dominican guy, actually, that follows my Telegram. He just messaged me out of the blue, and he just wanted to tell me his story. I guess he came to my home state, Pennsylvania, for work some years back, and hung out, and he wanted to just share his experience and tell me about how he liked the food, and he met some cool people here, and he had a good time, and he loves the mountains and the winters and all that kind of stuff. He said he really loved it here, and he wanted to just send his blessings or whatever. And I was like, well, so you're back in the Dominican Republic? He's like, yeah. He's like, I'm not going to stay in the United States. He's like, why? So my daughters can go to college and learn how to hate their fathers. Bring me home no children. He's like, and then he goes in. So there are people in other groups in other countries and other nations that are very much aware of the meat grinder of liberalism. He said while he was there, he was like, I guess he did computer stuff, right? So he did computer stuff for some colleges or some universities up here, and he ran into some Caribbean Hispanic people that were second generation here. He said he's like, the only thing that's still Hispanic about them in his view is that they speak a little bit of Spanish. He's like, outside of that, he's like, these are like completely different people to me. He's like, I would very much like them not to come to the Dominican Republic. He said, talking about how they have no religious values. They don't have any of the family values. He's like, they have all this kind of, there's like grievance politics. He was very much aware. He's a guy that's, he's on Telegram. So he's probably tapped into what we're tapped into. But it was really interesting to talk to a guy that's from a completely different culture, completely different people, identify this kind of stuff and like not want to come here because of that, right? So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Like, people can see this, right? Like, other peoples in other parts of the world are aware of the danger that's looming on the horizon, that liberalism is basically a kind of virus that is going to infect them and is going to absolutely destroy their way of life, right? And they don't want any part of it. China, there was a memo leaked. There was like an internal memorandum that was leaked that was part of like the Chinese Communist Party. It's called document number 9, where they basically say in this document that they're aware that Western liberalism is it's trying at all times effectively to work a soft coup on their culture, basically, and that they need to take active steps to ensure that doesn't happen, right? Like all of the intersectionality, all of the pause, all of the feminism, all of the stuff that is that destroys societies, basically, is coming for them, and that they're basically taking steps. Like they have the Great Firewall, right, with their internet. Their internet is closed. Of course, there are ways around it and everything like that, but they're trying. They're aware of it. They know that liberalism has no borders. It's like this gray goo that wants to consume everything. It's totally universalist. It recognizes no borders, no hierarchy, nothing but like complete and utter entropy or equality. So it's coming for them. These people recognize that it's coming from them, coming for them. And actually, I wrote the last article I wrote on the Substack. It touches on this a little bit. That like if you look at Muslim people in the Western world, they are like changing. They're changing very, very quickly, as are a lot of people. But because, Muslims are in their native lands, very traditionalist and everything like that, it's quite a striking difference. If you look at like second and third generation people, it's extremely striking, the contrast between themselves and their grandparents or their great grandparents. Andrew Tate is a good example. I don't know what his ethnicity is. It's obviously some sort of mystery meat, but like, I don't think that he's, Arabian or Persian. Like, I don't think that he's from the Middle East, but he is a Muslim, right? And he's able to reconcile his beliefs with, his lifestyle and everything. I think that is coming. This is something that you're going to see more widely amongst people of that religion. So it's happening. But to sort of bring it back to dysgenics and eugenics and everything like that, liberalism is essentially an engine for the production of dysgenic, downward, phenotypic traits. So the fact that it recognizes no borders and it's coming for everyone means that this is a global problem. This is not just the West. We are all, going to be feeling this dysgenic pressure over time. And there's only a few places in the world where it maybe won't penetrate. And these are like places like, the upland, the Himalayan uplands, something like that, like extremely remote places. Anywhere that's like remotely urban is getting it. It's happening. And it's just, there's you talk about the Great Reset. This is the real fucking Great Reset. And it's been going on for like 150 years. It's absolutely terrifying, man.
Yeah, that is spooky. I you know what? I don't really like feel good about that. Doesn't make me feel good that
No.
That's going to be going other places and destroying their cultures. You know what I mean? I don't get pleasure out of that. You know what I mean? Like,
No.
I would like that Dominican guy. I would, if it was up to me, Dominican Republic would stay Dominican and they would keep their way of life and do their thing and be their own people until the end of time and not get monkeyed with and turned into, fat gay retards. You know what I mean? Like turning the whole world into fat gay retards is not a good thing for anybody. You know what I mean? But it's going like that. It's gonna get in. It's gonna permeate everywhere. There's like feminist revolutions. Like they're like feminism is like starting to crop up in places like Iraq and Brazil and like all these. Brazil is like a hellhole with this kind of stuff. Liberalism is tearing through South America
for sure. Yeah, I got no beef with Muslims, man. Like I lived, for a couple of years when I was a kid. Like my family lived in a Muslim country. I actually have some affection for those cultures and those peoples and everything. Like I would not like to see that die. But yeah, this is bigger than any of us. This is bigger than Islam. This is bigger than Christianity. It's bigger than paganism. It's bigger than it's bigger than the West. It's a global thing. This is just where we're at, right? Like, and the the downward dysgenic pressure is, in some sense, it's a function of where we are in the time cycle. In some sense, it's a function of the long-term trajectory of our civilization. And I really do believe that the main thing that's driving this dysgenic pressure, and that always has, like even in remote times, like remotely ancient times, is technology. I think technology is extremely dysgenic. Which sounds weird because for most guys, like there are a lot of sort of technophiles in our spheres. And while I absolutely believe we need to embrace technology, it is a double-edged sword, right? It's like technology where most people, like especially most normies, kind of think of technology like, think of the bug man. He's in love with it. He thinks he takes it as a mark of human intelligence. And it's true. I mean, it does take a certain amount of intelligence to maintain, and certainly to invent technology. But technology is kind of a negative feedback mechanism for intelligence. It tends to push intelligence down, which might seem a little bit weird to say, but think of military technology. Think of what a weapon is doing. And I mean, what is it doing to the human genome? What military technology is doing is effectively to equalize people. It's placing the Chad knuckle dragger and the virgin club wielder guy on an even footing, right? Military technology artificially boosts the low to be able to compete with the high, shall we say. And this is what technology is doing sort of in general, right? It allows the less fit people to compete with the more fit. So if you take something like a prosaic example, like writing or a book or something like that. I mean, everybody who listens to this podcast likes books. So this is my Steelman example here. Think about what a book is doing, right? Basically what writing is doing is it's letting you it's letting you do away with the bard. You don't need memory anymore. You don't need to remember this shit. You've got it written down. This is one of my favorite things that anyone has ever written, and it's in Plato, which is funny. I like Plato. It's funny. I'm the Plato is gay dude, but Plato's I've got a serious respect for the guy. Anyway, that's another story. There's an episode in Plato's Phaedrus where basically there's a myth that Socrates tells. Socrates is basically trying to convince this other guy that writing is gay and that speech is better than writing. And the myth goes something like this. So in Egypt, there was this artificer god named Thoth. And Thoth invented all kinds of things. He was the god of numbers and math and science and astronomy and dice games and writing as well. And this god Thoth presented these inventions to the high god of Egypt. This is Amun-Ra. And he was looking for Ra's approval for all of these inventions. And so Ra goes through all the inventions one by one and sort of approves some and disapproves of others or whatever. And then he comes to writing. And Thoth tells Ra what a great invention this is. This is going to solve so many problems. It's going to improve people's memory. It's going to make them smarter. It's going to make them wiser, right? It's going to bring all kinds of boons and everything to the Egyptians. But when Ra speaks, Thoth gets an answer he didn't expect. What Ra says is that writing is going to do exactly the fucking opposite of what you think it's going to do, right? It's going to make people more forgetful, right? Instead of being able to remember shit, they're going to rely on writing as a reminder. It's going to make them more retarded too. They're not going to get wiser. People will only have the appearance of wisdom, right? When in reality, they're actually totally fucking ignorant, but they're just like a parrot who's able to repeat all the shit without understanding it. Writing is it makes you dependent on it, but it's also it's indiscriminate. It could be thrown around willy-nilly by people who actually fucking understand things and people who have no fucking business with it. So what writing is doing essentially is to artificially increase our fitness. It's like this crutch. It's like a cultural adaptation that we have that kind of covers a defect. You know what I mean? It sort of increases our cultural fitness at the expense of our genetic fitness, you could say, right? It makes us more capable at the expense of making us more retarded. So technology is it's good for the individual and it's really good for the group. but it's really fucking bad for the species, if you know what I mean. Like technology relaxes selection pressures to where like the weak and stupid can prosper off the genius of the few, right? And this is basically the whole arc of like what Dutton is saying, sort of contained in this like Phaedrus thing, this Egyptian myth. And because over time, over the generations, like you get regression to the mean, the overall effect, because like even though there might be some super geniuses, but there's like a lot of people who are just like kind of fat and lazy and stupid that prosper off of it. The overall effect is like a downward pressure on intelligence and like all these other things that we're talking about. So we end up having to invent social technology to like, number one, to like maintain the technology, but also to stave off the dysgenic effect of the technology. So like if you take as example something like farming, farming made life way fucking easier for humans, but it also made us fat and retarded. So we end up having to like invent states as a social technology to maintain farming as a cultural technology. In order to like maintain ourselves and not get absolutely blown the fuck out by these like lean and hungry semi-nomadic warrior aristocracies, the state was involved, was invented essentially to stave that off. And it's the same thing with all technology. Technology is adaptive at the group level, but only temporarily. The long-term effect, and especially for the species, is total fucking dysgenia. So for this reason, I'm actually not that worried about AI. There's been a lot of discussion about AI. We may talk about AI in like a future podcast, but I'm actually not that worried about that because I don't think like first of all, it's not going to become self-aware or self-replicating, but it will make us more stupid. And eventually the stupidity will make us unable to maintain it, right? And it'll suffer from like code rot or whatever it's called. And just due to entropy, the thing will fall apart. So anyway, as much as I like the idea of futurism, there's kind of like a natural ceiling that futurism runs into eventually, vis-a-vis technology. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that rant, but I think technology is dysgenic, basically. It's the idea.
Yeah. I think that goes into like Fermi paradox and all that too.
Exactly.
We're never any civilization that reaches space travel technology has already become too fat, gay, and retarded to actually travel through space. So that's a pretty funny idea that there are other civilizations throughout the galaxy that have climbed the ladder and got to the point where they could possibly achieve space travel, but they're already too fat, gay, and retarded.
You seriously, it's funny, but like I really do think that is the solution to the paradox. Like it is. It's like it's just the fact that like technology is required to do all the shit that like Star Trek wants to be able to do, but like we'll never get there because it just turns us all into fucking like troons and shit.
Yeah. Dude, oh my god, don't get me started on that. The troon thing. That is just so bizarre. It's like permeating everywhere now. I'm starting to see him in public. It's like, oh my god, what is it? I used to be like, wow, gross, but it's still pretty gross. But now I'm like starting to just like feel bad for them. You know what I mean? It's like
I still get the like, I still get the lizard brain effect. Like when I see one of these people, it's like a spider's dropped down the back of my shirt. I'm just kind of like, whoa, get the fuck away from me, kind of thing, right? Like it's
uncanny.
I feel bad for them too, but at the same time, like, fuck, dude. I don't know. There's almost, I hate to say it, but like if you look down on them, it's just they're so far fallen so far down, right? Like it's just gross.
Yeah, it's like it's at this point I don't even know. I can't even like really like talk to them or look at them or like want to interact with them because it makes my skin crawl. These people, like if you have like facial hair and an Adam's apple and you're wearing a dress and makeup, I just can't even. I don't even want to talk to you. You're just it's just such like a mockery of nature, and I don't know, and the fact that it's getting so, it's permeating so far, and I really do think that it's part of a ploy of the pharmaceutical companies and all this kind of stuff. I do think that the cosmetic surgery industry and all these people are making big money off of this, and this is like it's like their new thing. It's like the last thing was the opioids, flood everybody with opioids, and then open up a bunch of clinics that sell Subutex and Suboxone and shit, right? Create the problem and then create the solution. So I definitely think that that's part of it, but I also think that it's just a dysgenic thing. You have...
It is. There's like a decline of testosterone that's absolutely precipitous going on, right? And this has something to do with it as well, right? Like men who are high in testosterone are generally not the ones turning into these people. And if they are, then it's an ideological thing, and not like a biological thing quite so much.
Yeah. I'm not sure, but they're pretty weird looking. Like, I saw a bunch of them sort of recently. I went to this place that was kind of near us. It like a Japanese place. They have like the little bowls of Japanese food. My wife likes them, so and I like them too. They're pretty good.
I love Japanese food.
Yeah, I like Japanese food. It might be my favorite Asian food, like Eastern style food, because there's not a lot of sauce and stuff. It's very fresh. It's very simple. It's something that a Western person can get down with. So either way, I go into this place, right? It's like Japanese place, and it's not really it's not like an authentic. It's kind of like a fusion kind of place. It's ran by Asian people. I kind of suspect that they're not Japanese. I think they're Chinese, because they just don't look Japanese. They look Chinese. So I go into this fucking place, and it's in a city that was previously, a side of the city that was previously like hipster town. Like you went there 15 years ago, dudes that are wearing flannel shirts with beards and sandals, and girls with scarves in the middle of summer, and those big goofy glasses. It was hipsterville, right? Which actually, despite hating on hipsters, I will say this: they make some good stuff. You go to a hipster burrito place or a hipster coffee shop or hipster pizza place, they like put their heart and soul into that. Microbrews, dude, I will go to a hipster microbrewery any day of the week, because they're like putting their heart and soul into this. Like it's some sort of weird like backpedal into like traditionalism. They sort of like horseshoed themselves into traditionalism, where they've become like old school style traditional brewers, or so, I don't know what it is. And they're always like, "Hey man, you're gonna love this. We made a mango green peppercorn stout, and we've aged it, and I can't wait for you to taste it, bro. I just know you're gonna love it, bro." And like, so they're like, "All right, how can you hate this guy? He's trying to give me a delicious beer and like all this kind of stuff. How can you hate this guy?" Anyway,
these are the people who, like, in a better time would be like master artisans, but who need to shut the fuck up about politics.
Yeah. So I go to this place, which is previously Hipsterville. I walk in, and it is literally just mutants. The place is packed, and I could not identify. It was completely packed with like these racially and like sexually ambiguous creatures. They looked horrible. It wasn't even like
another kind. Yeah,
they're just ugly looking. All of them. They're all short and weird and dysgenic. And I stand in line. The stench is unbearable. It was horrible. There's like one, like, I guess he was a guy that was kind of like this mulatto guy with like these pink and purple nasty looking dreadlocks, wearing pajama pants. And then there was this like fat, I think it was a woman, creature with like where it looked like she looked like the clown from Spawn. She had like these like circus pants pulled up all the way. She had like a ring in her nose. Her head was like shaved, but it was also the stubble was dyed pink. She looked like some sort of like horror show, like an ICP album or something. Like it was pretty spooky looking. So, and it stunk. These people stunk. So I'm standing in line, and like I finally get up to the Chinese lady, and she's just, you know how Chinese people are not really confrontational. They're just kind of like, if things are fucked up, they just kind of get quiet, right? Yeah. This lady is not making eye contact with these creatures, nothing. She's just like, oh, thank you, have a good day. Thank you, have a good day. And she looks up and sees me, and she gets her face lights up, and she goes, oh, hello, how are you? What can I do for you? And I was like, oh,
it's an actual human. Look at that.
I must have lit up too. Finally, I get because she's a Chinese lady, but she, by all other circumstances, me and her would have nothing in common. Like there's no sort of attraction. We weren't flirting, anything. But I was just like, it was like a relief to see a Chinese lady as nature intends Chinese ladies to be. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, how you doing? It is my first time here. She's like, oh, your voice so handsome. You sound so handsome. What can I do for you? And like all this shit. So I ordered the food. It was like this like very pleasant conversation, ordering food from this random Chinese lady, which if you put me and this Chinese lady like in a room together, it would be like, we would have nothing in common. We would have nothing to talk about. You know what I mean? It would be like, so we would just be sitting there in silence. We have nothing in common. The only thing is she just saw, oh, finally a white dude, like as nature intends, right? Yeah. But if you put me and her in a room, like even like if I was like, fucking, so what are we gonna do here? You want a bone? Even that would be fucked up. She'd be like, oh no, before you fucking me, you have to fuck my grandmother. It's ancient Chinese ritual. And I have to do this fucking ritual where they wrap me in cloth and silk, and I have to walk out, and their grandparents sit on this platform like Indian style and observe. They like hit a gong, and like a midget comes out riding a llama with a jade mask. He rides past and sprinkles rice on my penis. Like it would be I'd have to go through this bizarre ritual to even do that. We don't even have that in common, right? But in that moment of time, these other creatures were so bizarre that me and this fucking Chinese lady were like, oh, finally a human.
Exactly. You're just like, at a relative sense, you're like closer to each other just by like not being completely fucked up. Yeah. Jesus Christ. Yeah. What do you think of old H.G. Wells would have thought about that scene? What do you think he would have thought about that?
Oh my God, he would have been like, these people are the Morlocks.
Yeah, exactly.
These are the Morlocks.
Holy fuck. What am I, 800,000 years into the future?
Yeah. Oh my God. So here's the thing with guys like H.G. Wells, right? I kind of didn't really paint him in a light that is like sympathetic from guys like us, right? I kind of painted him as everybody's going to hate his guts. But here's the deal. Is that if you took guys like him from his time that are kind of ideologically completely opposed to us in some ways, and you drop them off today, they would be far more sympathetic to us.
Yeah,
right?
they would be like dissident right thought leaders.
Yeah, he'd be like, oh my God, what? It'd be like it would be putting him in just a horror land, just nightmarish. You wouldn't even believe that this is real.
One thing I'm pretty sure that he would do is he would completely abandon his project of eugenics. He would say, well, I guess this ain't fucking working. Like, look at what actually happened, right? And it's true though. But like I think eugenics is a really fucking bad idea. This is where me and H.G. Wells disagree. And frankly, me and a lot of guys in our scene, I think eugenics is something that guys in the radical right are like, a lot of them are hot on it. And of course, eugenic practices have existed forever. And I get it. It's kind of based. It's like, it's very naturalistic. It's very organic, but I'm still skeptical of it.
Not that it's organic. I would say it's completely artificial. It's a technology.
Yeah. Stuff like the Spartans, like doing like exposing children or whatever. Like I'm not saying that it's
okay.
I'm not saying it's like moral or whatever, or that it's not moral. I just don't think like that it's practical. I don't think that eugenics will actually achieve its intended aim, especially not like if we were to do it today. And in fact, I think it would be a disaster and totally dysgenic. And like, you know, so like the first thing to understand is that wild IQ and personality disparities didn't evolve by accident, right? Like we as humans are actually, you know, fairly, we exhibit quite a bit of variation, even like within our groups, even within societies, right? And this variation is pretty useful, and it serves like an evolutionary purpose. And the purpose is that if like 98% of your population gets wiped out, it's good to have some people that are different than other people, so that it's like whatever it was that wiped you out isn't just going to like wipe out the remnant too. There'll be like some people that are actually adapted to the environment. The purpose of the variation is basically to let groups adapt quickly to changing conditions. And the problem is that eugenicists tend to favor like one type in general. Usually the kind of person that a eugenicist like H.G. Wells wants to make more of is like H.G. Wells, right? Yeah. It's like the 19th century like Goethe type of like, you know, or Faust, you know, guy. It's like the guy in his study that like just wants to like study philology and like have 1.1 children, and that's it. That's the kind of person that eugenicists want to reproduce. And like, you know, eugenicists would create what amounts essentially to a monoculture. And like
nerds.
Exactly. But like how adaptive would that be, right? Like if you just look at biology, like, you know, monocultures just in general, like whether it's a crop or whether it's like a human culture, these monocultures are unstable and they're fragile. They're prone to disease. They're prone to parasites. They tend to suffer from fertility problems. I mean, like you don't want total diversity, obviously. Like, you know, none of us would advocate for that, but you need some biological diversity, more than any eugenicist would allow, because all these people are autistic, INTP, fucking H.G. Wells types, right? Yeah. And like, you know, this is why farmers traditionally practiced crop rotation, because you need that biological diversity. And worst of all, monocultures, you know, they tend to fall over really easily when the wind starts blowing in a different direction, right? So, I mean, if Ed Dutton is right, that we go through these natural oscillations of like growth and, you know, eugenic pressure pushing up intelligence and pro-social personality and all that, and then we go into decline, we go through these cycles, we should probably not be like, you know, ardently selecting for people who thrive only in like one tiny little niche, right? Like K-selected slow life history types. So that's the first thing I think is like stupid about eugenics. Second of all, and I think that you could tie this in with a more religious worldview, is that like humans are shitty judges of fitness, right? Like the gods are much, much better judges. Or if you want to, you know, if you're, you know, a secular type, you could say nature, right? Nature is a fine-tuned system. It knows better than we do what the optimum level of intelligence is, the optimum level of like phenotypic variation should be. Mm-hmm. And I just think that like, you know, as religious people, we should have some fucking humility, right? Yeah. Like if we had eugenics, so just like, you know, take a case of like, imagine that eugenics existed in the Bronze Age. What would we have selected for? Well, we would have selected for like autistic chads that all have like, you know, schizophrenia or something like that. If we had eugenics in the Middle Ages, we'd be selecting for like walking textbooks who like can't carry on a conversation, but can like, you know, spit out the entire like Virgil's Aeneid from memory. If we did it in the Romantic era, we'd have a Goethe on every street corner, but he'd be too much of a urbane to fucking know how to grow a potato.
He'd be too much of a faggy.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right, though. These guys, they're also you see like H.G. Wells, these academic types, and you mentioned Lovecraft is one of these guys are all pretty like narcissist, right? So they envision a world where guys just like them run it, right? Where it's all completely just all guys like them. And here's the deal is that while these guys were brilliant and I love their writing and everything, I do not want those fucking guys in charge. I don't think nerds should be in charge of anything. We see what happens when nerds are in charge. And we see it going on with this transhumanism shit that Silicon Valley's coming out with, which is completely nuts. You know, imagine, like you mentioned, adaptive. How adaptive are these guys, right? There's like a fucking earthquake and oh my God, my chemistry set. You know what I mean?
Where's my fucking retainer? Like I think that if there is an earthquake or like a solar flare or something like that, or like a disease, like if COVID actually was a real fucking problem, like I just think that it would be better if there was like a few 90 IQ like football hooligans around than like just those people, right? Like that guy, like the North FC guy is probably our best bet, right? If we're being honest. Yeah. Like he probably has a better chance at life in like a collapsed environment than like most of the people in like the nationalist right. Like, let's be honest. However based like my worldview is, however high my IQ is, that guy is probably gonna fucking wreck me, right? Like in that situation. So it like if the folk is what matters most, like, you know, we need some phenotypic variation, and eugenicists tend to just like autistically select for themselves. And like the type, you know, of a eugenicist is like this hothouse flower who can't like survive out of a highly civilized environment, right? Mm-hmm. And like I you know, to come back to my original point of like, you know, what would H.G. Wells think of your like motley crew of mutants? It's just like, look at the actual fruits of eugenics. Like we actually had some of these policies that H.G. Wells wanted to. Like Ed Dutton goes into this in the book, and like they weren't all completely implemented, but we did have some, and they were like consciously eugenic, and like they were implemented. And how did that work out for us? In like a century, we have like arrived at fucking idiocracy.
Yeah.
So like this, I think this bears out some of these objections. It's like, how good is eugenics in reality? Like we obviously need some of the more eugenic practices. Like if people want to, you know, do like pre-birth screening for their kids for like serious problems and blah, 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 blah. We need obviously some eugenic practices. I'm not against it, but I don't think it's going to be like, I don't think it's going to be a cure for anything. And I think, in fact, that like societies that lean too hard into it are going to get fucked. But like the point is, you actually have to look. You have to look. Does it work in practice? We've had it. What happened there? If it doesn't work in practice, then the theories were absolutely nothing, right? Yeah. So yeah, I think if H.G. Wells was like somehow, you know, flung forward in his own time machine to like 2023, he'd be like, oh shit, yeah, let's fold up this Fabian society now and like just completely, let's just go do something else. Let's go home and catch the fucking game.
Yeah.
Because this ain't gonna do it, right?
Yeah. And also, like, here's the deal with the eugenics thing. Dude, I'm too much of a fucking bleeding heart. Like, if I had a kid that was actually like retarded or something, and you told me I had to get rid, I'd be like, nah, fuck you. I would like, I would love my retard. I would. First of all, like, why can't they live? Let them live. First of all, they're strong as fuck. He can do a lot of like awesome work on the property. You know what I mean? You could really put him to work. And here's the deal. I'm gonna love my retard son. And here's the deal. If eugenicists try to come for him, I'm gonna shoot you. I'm gonna cut you up, and I'm gonna throw you down into his lair to feast on you.
There you go.
That's what you father. A delectable feast, father.
That's what you got coming. Oh shit.
So yeah, I don't want. I would never be able to do that. I don't know. Maybe because I'm a bleeding heart pussy modernist or whatever. I wouldn't be able to do the Spartan thing. It's just maybe you're throwing this. And also, here's the thing with eugenics. If everybody became real smart, we wouldn't be the smart guys anymore. I would have to go. I wouldn't be doing a. That's for people listening to my ramblings. I would have to go work at fucking McDonald's or something. I don't want to do that. Yeah. I kind of like being the smart guy in a
yeah. I got you. But yeah, it's definitely I don't know. I am not hot on eugenics. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it's going anywhere, but yeah. It's not one of those things where I like this idea has to die in the radical right or whatever, but whatever. I just don't like we're nowhere near in a position of being able to implement it or whatever. So at the end of the day, it's kind of fucking academic debate as so much of it is, but
it's nerd talk in my opinion. If you have a healthy society, eugenics will just will be better. People, if you have a healthy society where people are good, here's the deal with anything, right? With any political system, with any economic system, with any type of socioeconomic structure, whatever you want to say. If you have like good people there and they like care about each other and it's high trust, good things are going to happen, right? If you have smart, virtuous people in charge, good things are going to happen, period. So it doesn't matter if you're, every civilization goes through a retard age and then goes through a genius age and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, as we see with H.G. Wells and his, like, how brilliant he was, but also how, like, pretty retarded he was, you can't trust nerds to be in charge of anything. I think that's the moral of the story. You just can't trust nerds.
No, definitely not. And I mean, these people were subordinated for a long time, right? Like, this is like history tells this story over and over and over again, right? Like the idea that the warrior essentially subordinates the priest to himself, right? Like the Eugenics subordinates the Tyrrhic. Like it's part of our mythic like complex. This is not just like us talking shop, right? It's something that actually runs through our whole history, our whole prehistory as peoples. It probably goes back, to the last ice age. The idea is that, the realist is sovereign over the idealist. It's a very ancient idea. It's so ancient that it's embedded in our prehistory. So
based.
Yeah, nerds. Okay, you got your place, but Napoleon's gonna have to boss you around. I'm sorry.
You can't be trusted because your ideas are too retarded. You're really smart, but you got to be told what to do.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Mike, we are over 2 hours. You want to start shutting it down?
Let's do it.
Okay. So you guys out there, as Mr. Mike said, breeding the human herd from Mr. Is he Dr. Edward Dutton, or is he?
Yes, he is. I believe he is.
Doctor. Man, that's pretty based.
Doctor. We got a few doctors in our roster. Actually, it's pretty impressive.
That's dope. So Dr. Edward Dutton is coming out very, very soon. You guys will be able to pre-order it. It's a great book. I've had a sneak peek at it. You guys are just gonna love this thing. It is everything that he's ever said, kind of condensed into one book. So for folks out there that might not be familiar with his whole video library, which is actually pretty freaking huge at this point, then you can just read this book and understand everything that he gets at. It compiles everything. It's a very good book. It's not too boring either. He does a very good job. He's got a couple things in there. He's got a little bit of humor in there. He tells some stories, and it's not just dry clinical news material. It's written by a human being. It's written by a human being. So you guys are really, really going to enjoy it. I like it. I'm still working through it, but you guys are going to love it. So that's coming out very soon. If you're not signed up already, which if you're listening now, you probably are, but just in case you're not, go over to imperiumpress.org/podcast and go sign up to the Gumroad over there. You're going to love it. Lots of great stuff. Culture Dads every single week. You can't beat it. Plus other perks such as hardback books, etc. It's great. So help support Imperium Press and so they can grow and fulfill their destiny, become the institution that they were born to be, and help them save the Western canon from those who wish to erase it. And then also, if you want to check out what I'm doing, go over to thebizarrearchives.com and buy books. We got lots of great books coming out, so go check that out. Also on Twitter and Telegram at The Bizarre Archives. And I'll see you guys next time here on Culture Dad's Age of Sword